So first off, I thought we would just start. I'd love to hear a little bit about your memories of Jamie and what she was like, and to tell the audience a little bit about what she was like as a person, so we can have that.
Yeah, you know what? Everything behind me kind of sums it up. There's a photo of her dancing, and let me shift out of the way because my daughter was a beautiful competitive dancer. But there's also a quote that she kind of lived her life by, and she didn't make it up, but she found it online, and it just inspired her every day. Dreams and dedication are a powerful combination. Listen, my daughter was destined to do amazing things. Beyond just being beautiful and a beautiful dancer, she was good. She was a good person. She knew right from wrong. She stood up for other people. She was 14, but she was a kid who would volunteer her time for kids with special needs because she wanted these kids to just have all the same opportunities, to have all the same social relationships that she had. She was a kid who, if she saw someone being bullied, and my daughter was a petite little thing, would put herself in the middle of it and make the bully stop. She just had that tough gene, and that gene that taught her right from wrong, and gun violence stole it from us.
I've interviewed some of the Parkland kids, and they talk about that moment afterwards where they realized that they didn't even have time to grieve. They had to take action immediately. And you were part of that whole moment. Can you talk a little bit about what your reaction, your feeling was?
Yeah, and it's different than the Parkland kids because my daughter was killed.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of pivotal points that stand out for me. One was my wife and I had first gone to the hospital hoping for some sign of my daughter, and she wasn't there. And on the way driving home from the hospital, and we were in two separate cars, one of my best friends, who's a police officer, went back to the school and he identified my daughter. And he called me, and I ended up needing to pull off the side of the road. And I had my wife pull off so that I could tell her that our daughter was murdered. That is a pivotal moment that I remember as if it happened literally a second ago. Almost everything for the next 24 hours is to some extent a pile of mush.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was in shock. I don't know if there was too much emotion happening in terms of coming to grips with what happened to my daughter, needing to plan a funeral for my child, needing to think about what I'm going to say at a funeral about my child, dealing with the reality that my daughter was the first publicly identified, so helicopters were flying over our house and media was showing up. It was chaos, and all I could think about is I have to protect my family. But there's so much about that first 24 hours I just don't remember. I just don't, until the Parkland Vigil. I got to that Parkland Vigil, and the mayor asked me if I wanted to speak. And, she asked me when I got there, so I didn't have anything prepared. And I went up on the stage. I didn't know what I was going to say. And I looked out and I see this crowd of thousands of people, and they're all holding candles, and everybody's crying. And within that crowd was a lot of these kids. And for the first time in 24 hours, it hit me what happened to my family. For the first time in 24 hours, my world slowed down and I had clarity. And I just started talking to this crowd. And I recall saying, for the first time, this was gun violence. I got to tell you, I don't recall even registering with me until that moment exactly what had happened to me, until I stood in front of that crowd. And I just said, this was gun violence. And I got done with the speech. We stayed through the rest of the vigil. And I got home that night. My wife And a bunch of family and friends stayed back. They didn't come. My sister, my son, and a few other friends did come with me. And I walked in my door and I just said, I'm going to break that effing, I'll clean it up, that effing gun lobby. It all was becoming clear to me. And from that moment on, I continued with what I needed to do to protect my family. I continued with what I needed to do to plan a funeral. But I also was becoming angrier over what had happened and more clear on the fact that my life is going to be different going forward.
Yeah. Now, there was a moment after this where President Trump at the time seemed like he was going to be of some use in championing some modest gun legislation. And then he, as documented in the documentary, he meets with the NRA one night, and then the next day his position changes. What was your feeling after that?
So just to be clear, I was already furious with the president and actually called him out at Jamie's funeral. And here's why. The morning of her funeral, he put out a tweet blaming the Parkland murder on the Russia investigation. And he literally pulled what happened in Parkland into his BS, into his nonsense, and he politicized it. And I read that tweet over and over that morning, getting angrier and angrier. And my wife is trying to get me to calm down because we had my daughter's funeral to go to. And I did what I only knew to do, which is I sat down and I started writing. And I rewrote the ending of what I was going to say about Jamie with a message to the president, telling him he did not have my permission to drag my daughter's murder into his political Russia investigation. He does have my permission to reach out and do something about gun violence if he wants to do that. So I was already angry. He never did reach out. When I saw him sitting around the table chastising all the other politicians, I didn't believe him. I know many had hope. I did not believe him because he had already lied to me that week in my mind. So when that night it became news that he met with the NRA, I wasn't surprised. That's who he is. It's who he always was. And I think as a country, we've done a terrible job of actually listening to him tell us exactly who he is. I don't know if you're aware of the story of when I recorded for the movie. It was on January 6th. It was the day of the insurrection. And it's important because we had all of our phones put aside in another room. And I was talking to the film crew about my fear that his language, that he is telling us what's going to happen, combined with the intersection of white supremacy and guns, is going to lead to a violent event on our democracy before President Biden takes over. And at the end of our recording, because we were literally having this conversation about this possibility, at the end of the recording, we all go to our phones and I said, guys, are you all aware of the news? This is what we were just talking about. It's happening. Because you have to listen to him. He tells you everything you need to know. He lies a lot, but you get to kind of see through it. There's very specific messaging in everything he does.
Yeah. You say in the documentary that the NRA views the deaths of children as the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
It's interesting now, obviously the NRA has declared bankruptcy. They've lost their case in Texas, so they're going to have to go through with it. What do you think about these new events? I mean, is it finally catching up with them, do you think?
Listen, every dead child and dead adult is a cost of doing business for them, because every time they use it as an opportunity to sell more guns. So they don't shed a tear over my daughter's murder. they try to sell guns off of my daughter's murder. That's how vile and despicable they are. Their bankruptcy was always BS. The day they filed, they also said, we're in the best financial condition we've ever been in. So, which is why a Texas judge ended up tossing it. One could call it a fraud. Listen, they are in financial trouble. They are weakened. There's no question about it, but they still exist. And if there's one thing that the movie makes clear, as long as they exist, they're like a snake, you know? They always have this ability to resurrect. We need to finish them off. We can't lay off. We can't let off. We need to make sure they are dismantled, which is what the New York State Attorney General wants to do. And we need to get them out of our public safety. They make a living off of dead people, and we need to get them out of our lives.